Yes, President Donald Trump says he's not seeking war with Tehran. He's indicated that he is ready to defuse tensions by reaching a deal to bolster Iran's flagging economy. While the U.S. president said he will impose further sanctions aimed at stopping the country from obtaining nuclear weapons, he left the door open to negotiations aimed at reaching a settlement. The overtures from the White House came as was confirmed that the U.S. had launched a cyber attack against Iranian military computer systems, and as U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said he was traveling to Saudi Arabia and the UAE to ensure we're strategically aligned with allies, as he said. Trump earlier said he pulled out of airstrikes in retaliation for Iran's downing of an unmanned U.S. drone because it would have killed 150 people. Ibrahim Deen is researcher at Afro-Middle East Centre. A very good evening to you, Ibrahim, and thank you so much for speaking to us. Is this a breakthrough, even though Donald Trump hasn't introduced new sanctions against Iran?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a sense it does show that the Iranians are right, that Trump doesn't want to go to war, and that, if this escalates the situation enough, Trump would call for talks. The question is, and as Trump still says, is the talks still have preconditions, the nuclear program, but more importantly, I think, is Iran's sponsorship of proxy groups in the region. These are very unlikely to make any progress in talks with Iran.
So there are some who have argued that it seems what the U.S. is seeking is for Iran itself to put itself in a corner, meaning stick to the deal that Trump himself rejected when he came into office. What is your view of this?
I mean, I think the U.S. wants a broader deal. The 2015 nuclear agreement was just what we would call an arms proliferation agreement, and only covered the nuclear program. It didn't cover Iran's sponsorship of proxy groupings across the region, didn't cover, Iranian activities across the region as well. And so Trump wants a deal that would be more all-encompassing. And the negotiators in the nuclear deal specifically made it confined to a nuclear energy program because they felt that it would be very difficult to actually have a wider negotiation. And I think the situation is still the same in that sense that, trying to negotiate a broad deal with Iran won't be easy, especially because, one, the U.S. sanctions, and two is the fact that, the deal itself didn't really give much to Iran in the past 2 years. And so the Iranians would be very skeptical about agreeing to anything unless, of course, they see proper progress.
And with these new sanctions, some say meant to cripple Iran, its capabilities, even its intelligence systems, which they, of course, themselves deny. Is it likely to push things over the edge? Because even the Israeli minister has said that he believes that they could launch those rocket attacks anytime deemed necessary. I'm asking really if the situation allows for friendly talks.
I think, the fact that Trump recalled those attacks and basically issued a warning to Iran via Oman does show that there is back-channel negotiations happening and that there is space for these negotiations. And I think the new sanctions, yes, it's very difficult to see real results coming from these talks. But there is possibility for de-escalation, or at least, a de-escalation in the military confrontation that is currently occurring between the two states.
So what is the situation as you see it? Has the United States managed to stop Iran in its track, because they deny that they have been able to stop their systems, especially their rocket and missile systems, from working?
I mean, I think if you look at the U.S. action or the cyber attack, it was meant just to do it for a certain period of time. It was more just what you would call malware put into the systems. And so, yes, it would have, and it has, would have stopped Iran's capacity for that time. But the bigger question is, has what the U.S. done stopped Iran from really achieving anything larger if it wanted to do so? And I don't think the Iranians want war or want more confrontation. And so, in that sense, I don't think the U.S. has moves in the past few days has achieved anything in that sense. But, in another sense, it does open the door or at least Trump's recall of the airstrikes does open the door for negotiations that can hopefully at least de-escalate the situation. Rather than trying to have broad goals of getting a proper solution and something that will allow for the region to have more peace and growth and democracy, at least a de-escalation is possible after the events of the past 3 days.
There are those who've said, though, that the past few days, if anything, prove the fact that these tensions could escalate and very highly, especially given the fact that there are rumors that the U.S. has been able to successfully step up its secret hacking of foreign computer networks. Is this likely, and how would this impact on its relationship with Iran?
I think it proves just the opposite. It proves the fact that the U.S. doesn't want to go to war with Iran, that Trump isn't seeking a war a year prior to an election. And that's why he did something similar to what he did in North Korea, that he's very hesitant to go to war, where he, basically said that Rocket Man is, called Kim Jong-un Rocket Man and said he has a bigger button than Kim Jong-un's button. And then when, the trigger was about to be pulled, Trump pulled back and there was negotiations. And so I think there's a similar situation playing out in Iran. However, I think because of the sentiment, the public sentiment against Iran in the U.S., the fact that Gulf states are very unlikely to want more talks, it's going to be a lot more difficult to actually have any type of a deal with Iran than it was with the North Koreans.
But isn't the reality the fact that Iran is also a major oil producer and that the United States itself cannot really afford to disrupt that energy supply from the Middle East?
I mean, I think it wants to disrupt its supply, because the United States is the largest oil producer in the world, and also sees in Saudi Arabia swing state with spare capacity. So it basically the Americans want the regime to be forced to change by virtue of economic pressure, and not by virtue of sending American personnel over to the region. So, and that hasn't changed. Trump hasn't changed that stance. And in fact, today, Trump just recently tweeted, that's how we have to look at U.S. foreign policy sometimes, that, these tankers through the Gulf must provide their own security for shipping lanes. So, it does show that the Trump administration still wants a new regime in Iraq. It just won't do it or go about it militarily, especially a year prior to an election.
Final question. There have been those who are saying the international community, especially those in the region, have failed to quell tensions between the two. What is likely to happen now, including allies and foes of both countries?
Yeah, I mean, I think specifically regional countries are actually inflaming the situation by, actually advocating more confrontation. And that's not going to solve the issue in any way. So I think there needs to be more, at least back-channel negotiations through Oman, through Kuwait, two of the more neutral regional countries, aimed at, one, de-escalating and confidence measures, to hopefully negotiating or concluding another agreement as a supplement or an addendum to the 2015 nuclear deal. I think Iran will be open and willing to negotiate this. I think Trump wants to do this because he's a deal guy, but I think the regional countries and Israel and Saudi Arabia specifically, I don't think they want to see these deals happening, and so we'll attempt to scupper it and do have lots of financial leverage to do so.
All right, thank you very much for your time and insights. Ibrahim Deen is researcher at Afro-Middle East Centre.